My name is Eleanor, and I just turned 65 last week. I thought this milestone birthday would be different, special even. I spent days planning what I believed would be a beautiful family celebration, calling each of my children, decorating my home with navy blue ribbons, and preparing all their favorite dishes from scratch. I set the table for 12 people, polished my good silver, and waited with such hope in my heart. But as the evening hours passed and my phone stayed silent, I realized something devastating. Not a single person was coming to my party. Before I share what happened that day, let me know where you are watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you will not believe what my daughter-in-law did next. The week leading up to my birthday felt like preparing for Christmas morning. I had called Robert first, my eldest son who works as a corporate attorney downtown. When I mentioned the party, he paused for just a moment before saying he would definitely be there with Margaret, his wife of 15 years. Janet, my daughter, who lives about 40 minutes away with her husband and 2 teenage boys, promised she would drive over after her youngest son's soccer practice ended. William, my baby, at 38, assured me he would take time off from his restaurant management job to celebrate with his old mom. I spent Tuesday at the grocery store carefully selecting ingredients for pot roast, the dish Robert always requested as a child. I picked out fresh green beans for the casserole Janet loved and gathered everything needed for my famous apple pie that William could never resist. The produce section felt like a treasure hunt as I chose the perfect potatoes, carrots, and onions. I even splurged on a beautiful bouquet of yellow roses for the dining room centerpiece. Wednesday was dedicated to cleaning every corner of my home. I vacuumed the carpets twice, dusted every surface, including the picture frames holding memories of family vacations and graduations. The dining room received special attention as I pulled out the good china, the set my late husband Charles had given me for our 20th wedding anniversary. Each plate held memories of previous celebrations, holiday dinners, and quiet Sunday suppers when the children still lived at home. Thursday evening, I spent hours in the kitchen preparing side dishes that could be reheated easily. The green bean casserole filled the house with the aroma of cream of mushroom soup and crispy fried onions. I made my mother's cornbread recipe, the one that had been passed down through 3 generations. The anticipation built with each completed dish, and I found myself humming old songs while I worked. Friday morning arrived with crisp autumn air and golden sunlight streaming through my kitchen windows. I woke up feeling more energetic than I had in months. The pot roast went into the slow cooker at 8 in the morning, filling the entire house with rich, savory scents. I arranged fresh flowers from my garden in small vases throughout the living room and dining room. The navy blue streamers and balloons transformed my home into a festive celebration space. By afternoon, I had set the dining room table with military precision. 12 place settings with the good china cloth napkins folded just so, and gleaming silverware positioned exactly as my mother had taught me decades ago. The centerpiece looked magazine perfect, surrounded by small votive candles that would create warm, intimate lighting for our dinner together. Saturday morning, my 65th birthday, I woke up at 5 o'clock without needing an alarm. Excitement coursed through my veins like electricity. This was going to be the day that brought my scattered family back together, the day we would create new memories to carry us through another year. I took extra time getting ready, applying makeup more carefully than usual, and styling my silver hair until it looked salon fresh. The new navy blue dress I had purchased specifically for this occasion fit perfectly, and I felt confident and hopeful as I checked my reflection one final time. Everything had to be perfect for my children and grandchildren. The morning hours passed quickly as I made final preparations. I checked the pot roast, which was tender and falling apart beautifully. The apple pie sat cooling on the kitchen counter, its golden crust looking exactly like something from a magazine. Green bean casserole waited in the refrigerator ready to be heated when everyone arrived. Fresh rolls were ready for the oven, and I had even prepared a small selection of appetizers in case people arrived hungry. 7 o'clock arrived, the time I had told everyone to come. I sat in my living room, hands folded in my lap, listening for the sound of car doors slamming in my driveway. The house smelled incredible. Candles flickered on every surface, and soft jazz music played from the radio in the kitchen. I imagined the sounds of laughter and conversation that would soon fill these rooms. 8 o'clock came and went. My stomach started to knot with worry, but I told myself that everyone was just running late. Modern families have busy schedules, and Saturday evening traffic can be unpredictable. I picked up my phone and dialed Robert's number, expecting to hear that they were on their way and apologizing for the delay. Margaret answered on the third ring, her voice sounding distant and slightly annoyed. "Eleanor, what can I do for you?" she asked, as if I were interrupting something important. When I asked about the party, she delivered the blow with casual indifference. "Oh, Robert is working on a major case that requires his attention tonight. He cannot leave the office." The line went quiet for a moment before she added, "I assumed you would understand that work comes first." My hands trembled as I hung up and immediately called Janet. The phone rang and rang before going straight to voicemail. Her cheerful recorded voice told me to leave a message and she would call back as soon as possible. I left a brief message asking if everything was okay and when I should expect her arrival. William's phone also went directly to voicemail. The automated voice informed me that the customer was either on another call or had turned off their phone. I sat in my empty living room staring at the beautifully set dining room table and felt the first wave of genuine worry wash over me. 9 o'clock brought the crushing realization that nobody was coming to my birthday party. I sat alone at my dining room table looking at 12 empty chairs arranged around untouched place settings. The pot roast had been ready for hours. The side dishes were perfectly prepared, and 65 unlit candles sat waiting on top of my homemade apple pie. The silence in my house felt deafening. No sounds of children playing, no adult conversations drifting from the living room, no clinking of glasses or scraping of silverware against china plates. Just the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I began clearing the table with shaking hands, carefully stacking plates that had never been used and folding napkins that had never touched a lap. Each item felt heavier than it should have, weighted down by disappointment and the growing realization that I had been abandoned on what should have been a special day. That was when I made the mistake of checking social media on my phone. Facebook showed me exactly where my family had chosen to spend their Saturday evening instead of celebrating with me. Robert had posted a photo from the country club dressed in golf attire with Margaret beside him, both of them smiling broadly at what appeared to be a social gathering. The caption read, "Great evening with friends at the club." Janet had shared pictures from what looked like an elegant dinner party surrounded by women I did not recognize, everyone dressed up and holding wine glasses. The photos were time-stamped just 30 minutes earlier, proving she was nowhere near my house or even thinking about driving over. Her post said, "Girls' night out with my amazing friends. Needed this so much." William's Instagram story showed him at a crowded sports bar, arm around his buddies, everyone holding beer bottles and cheering at multiple television screens. The timestamp showed he had been there since 6 o'clock, meaning he had never intended to come to my party at all. The evidence was overwhelming and devastating. Each of my children had deliberately chosen to be somewhere else on my birthday. This was not about traffic delays or work emergencies or scheduling conflicts. They simply had not wanted to spend time with their mother on her 65th birthday. I sank into my kitchen chair and began to cry deep sobs that seemed to come from somewhere I had kept locked away for months. The grief was not just about tonight, but about the gradual realization that I had become irrelevant in the lives of the people I loved most. When had I stopped being a priority? When had family dinners and celebrations become optional obligations that could be easily dismissed? 3 years had passed since Charles died, and I thought I had adjusted to widowhood reasonably well. I maintained my independence, kept up with household responsibilities, and tried not to burden my children with too many requests for visits or phone calls. But sitting alone in my kitchen, surrounded by enough food to feed 12 people, I wondered if my efforts to be self-sufficient had been misinterpreted as not needing or wanting family connection. At 10 o'clock, just as I was wrapping leftover pot roast for the refrigerator, my doorbell rang. My heart jumped with desperate hope that maybe someone had finally remembered and come to salvage what remained of my birthday celebration. I quickly checked my appearance in the hallway mirror and opened the front door, expecting to see Robert or Janet with apologetic smiles and believable excuses. Instead, Margaret stood alone on my front porch, car keys in her hand, and an expression I could not immediately read. She was not dressed for a party, wearing casual jeans and a simple sweater, instead of the elegant outfit I would have expected for a family celebration. Her demeanor seemed uncomfortable, almost nervous, as she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Margaret, thank you for coming," I said, relief flooding through me despite the lateness of her arrival. I was starting to worry that something terrible had happened to everyone. The food is still warm, and I can have everything on the table in just a few minutes. She walked into my living room and looked around at the decorations, the prepared dining room, and the obvious evidence that I had been expecting a house full of people. Her expression grew more uncomfortable as she took in the scene, and she remained standing rather than sitting down, as I had hoped. "Eleanor, I need to be honest with you," Margaret said, her voice carrying a tone I had never heard from her before. "I did not come here for the party." The words hit me like cold water, and I felt my welcoming smile fade as confusion took its place. "I do not understand," I replied, gesturing toward the dining room. "Robert said work was keeping him busy, but surely now that you are here, we can still have a nice evening together. I made all of your favorite dishes." Margaret shook her head slowly and remained standing in the middle of my living room. "Eleanor, I came because Robert and I have been discussing something important, and we decided it was time to have a serious conversation with you. We think you should consider moving to a senior living facility." The words hung in the air like smoke, and I felt my world tilt sideways. "A senior living facility?" I repeated, certain I had misunderstood her meaning. "You mean a nursing home?" "Not exactly a nursing home," Margaret clarified, though her tone suggested the distinction was minimal. "More like an assisted living community where you would have your own apartment, but access to meals, activities, and medical care when needed. Robert and I have been researching several nice facilities in the area." I sat down heavily on my sofa, trying to process what I was hearing. "Margaret, I live independently in my own home. I cook, clean, drive, manage my finances, and take care of myself completely. Why would you think I need assisted living?" She perched on the edge of my armchair, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation, but determined to continue. "Eleanor, your house is far too large for one person. You spend too much time alone, and honestly, Robert and I are concerned about your mental state. Tonight is a perfect example. You planned this elaborate party, and it seems like you have unrealistic expectations about family obligations." The accusation stung worse than anything I could have imagined. Unrealistic expectations. I invited my family to celebrate my 65th birthday. How is that unrealistic? Margaret's expression grew more confident as she continued her prepared speech. "Eleanor, Robert works extremely hard to provide for our family. Janet has her own responsibilities with her children and household. William is trying to establish his career. They cannot be expected to drop everything whenever you want family time. I planned this celebration weeks in advance," I said, my voice rising, despite my efforts to remain calm. "I called everyone, personally confirmed the date and time, and made sure it worked with their schedules. This is not about dropping everything. This is about showing up when you say you will show up." Margaret sighed as if I were being deliberately difficult. "The point is, Eleanor, that you are becoming too dependent on your children for social interaction and emotional support. Robert thinks it would be healthier for everyone if you had more structure in your daily life and access to people your own age for companionship. I sat in stunned silence for several long moments, trying to absorb the magnitude of what Margaret had just revealed. This was not a spontaneous suggestion born from genuine concern. This was a calculated plan that had been discussed and decided without any input from me whatsoever. "How long have you and Robert been planning this conversation?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil raging inside me. Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her chair and avoided direct eye contact. "We have been concerned about your situation for several months now. Since around your birthday last year, actually." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "My birthday last year, you have been planning to put me in a nursing home for an entire year." "It is not a nursing home," Margaret insisted, but her correction felt meaningless. "And we were not planning anything definitive. We were just observing your behavior and discussing our concerns as a family." "As a family," I repeated slowly. "So Janet and William are part of this discussion as well?" Margaret nodded reluctantly. "Robert spoke with both of them several months ago. Everyone agrees that your current living situation is not sustainable long term." I felt a cold clarity settle over me like ice water. Every family interaction over the past year suddenly took on new meaning. Every phone call, every brief visit, every polite conversation had been an evaluation. My own children had been studying me like a specimen, looking for signs of incompetence or decline that would justify their predetermined conclusion. "Is that why nobody came to my party tonight?" I asked. "Because you all decided that wanting to celebrate my birthday with my family was evidence of mental decline." Margaret's silence was answer enough. The elaborate cruelty of their plan became crystal clear. They had allowed me to prepare for weeks to shop and cook and decorate and hope, knowing full well that nobody intended to show up. They had used my birthday celebration as evidence against me, proof that I had unrealistic expectations and poor judgment. I stood up from the sofa, and Margaret looked surprised by the sudden movement. My voice when I spoke was calm and controlled in a way that seemed to unnerve her more than shouting would have. "Margaret, I want you to leave my house right now." "Eleanor, please try to understand that we are only trying to help you," she said, rising from her chair but making no move toward the door. "This decision is coming from a place of love and concern." Love and concern. I walked to my phone and picked up the receiver. If this is how my family shows love and concern, then I think I need some professional advice about my legal rights. "What are you doing?" Margaret asked, genuine alarm creeping into her voice for the first time since her arrival. "I am calling my attorney, Harold Peterson. If my own family believes I am mentally incompetent, then I need legal counsel to protect my interests." I began dialing the number I had memorized years ago when Charles and I first wrote our wills. "Eleanor, wait. You do not need to involve lawyers in a family discussion," Margaret said quickly, moving toward me with her hands raised, as if approaching a dangerous animal. I held up one hand to stop her approach, while continuing to dial with the other. "Oh, but I absolutely do need legal advice, Margaret, because tomorrow morning I am going to make some significant changes to my will and estate planning." The color drained from Margaret's face. "What kind of changes?" I smiled at her with cold satisfaction. "Well, if my children think I am too mentally incompetent to live independently, then perhaps I am too mentally incompetent to leave them substantial inheritances. Harold will help me determine the best way to restructure my assets." Margaret was now visibly panicking. "Eleanor, you are overreacting. We never said you were incompetent. We just think a different living arrangement might be better for your health and social life." "Every single one of you just showed me exactly how much I mean to this family," I replied, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You humiliated me on my 65th birthday. You have been lying to me for an entire year. And you came into my home tonight to tell me that wanting to spend time with my children is evidence of mental illness. The following Monday morning, I sat in Harold Peterson's law office for the first time since Charles's funeral 3 years earlier. Harold had been our family attorney for over 20 years, and his familiar presence provided comfort during what felt like the most important conversation of my life. Eleanor, I need you to understand that you have complete legal control over your living situation. Harold explained, his voice gentle but firm. No one can force you into any type of care facility unless a court determines you are legally incompetent, which would require extensive medical evaluation and evidence of cognitive decline. The relief I felt was enormous. So, Robert cannot simply decide that I need assisted living and make arrangements without my consent. Absolutely not, Harold confirmed. You are legally competent to make your own decisions about housing, medical care, finances, and every other aspect of your life. Your children have no legal authority over you unless you specifically grant them that authority through legal documents. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing my current will and discussing options for revising my estate planning. Harold suggested several strategies that would protect my assets while giving me maximum flexibility for future decisions. The conversation was empowering in ways I had not expected. By Wednesday, I had contacted Susan Miller, a real estate agent who specialized in helping seniors transition to more manageable housing situations. Susan showed me several beautiful condominiums in a coastal community about 60 miles from my current home, far enough away to represent a fresh start, but close enough to maintain connections with local friends and activities. The oceanfront community was specifically designed for active adults with amenities like walking trails, fitness facilities, art studios, and organized social activities. During my first visit, I met Patricia, a 70-year-old widow who had moved there 2 years earlier after her adult children pressured her to sell her family home. Her story sounded remarkably similar to mine. I thought moving here would feel like giving up, Patricia told me as we walked along the beach behind the condominium complex. Instead, it felt like getting my life back. I have more social interaction now than I had in my big, empty house, but it is all by choice rather than obligation. I also met Dorothy, a divorced woman in her late 60s who had downsized to the community after retirement. My children visit more often now than they did when I lived closer to them, she said with a laugh. I think they like me better when I am not depending on them for entertainment and emotional support. The more time I spent in the community, the more excited I became about the possibility of starting fresh. I could have my own space, my independence, and access to friendship and activities whenever I wanted them. Most importantly, I would be surrounded by people who had chosen to be there, rather than people who felt obligated to tolerate me. By Friday of that week, I had submitted an application for a 2-bedroom condominium with an ocean view and a small balcony perfect for morning coffee. The unit would be available within 6 weeks, giving me time to sell my current house and make arrangements for moving. I also registered for volunteer work at the local animal shelter, signed up for watercolor painting classes, and put my name on the list for the community book club. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about my future rather than nostalgic about my past. 6 months later, I sat on my balcony watching the sunrise over the Atlantic Ocean, holding a cup of coffee and feeling more peaceful than I had in years. My morning routine had become a source of joy rather than a series of tasks to fill empty hours. Yoga on the balcony, coffee with Patricia and Dorothy, volunteer work at the animal shelter, and afternoon art classes had replaced the loneliness and uncertainty that had characterized my previous year. The transformation in my daily life was remarkable. At the shelter, I worked with abandoned dogs, helping them learn to trust humans again and preparing them for adoption into loving homes. The parallels to my own situation were not lost on me, and the work felt deeply meaningful. My watercolor paintings had progressed from amateur attempts to pieces I was genuinely proud to display in my new home. My phone rang while I was enjoying the peaceful morning, and I saw Robert's name on the caller ID. Over the past 6 months, my children had called sporadically, their voices carrying guilt and uncertainty that had not been present in years. This conversation would be no different. "Mom, I hope you are settling in well," Robert said, his tone carefully neutral. "Margaret and I have been talking, and we realize we may have handled things poorly last year. We miss you, and we were wondering if you might consider moving back closer to home." I took a slow sip of my coffee and watched a group of dolphins playing in the waves beyond my balcony. "Robert, I am exactly where I need to be," I replied calmly. "This community has given me friendships, purpose, and independence that I had forgotten were possible." "But we barely see you anymore," he protested. "The grandchildren ask about their grandmother, and it is difficult to explain why you moved so far away." "It is only 60 miles, Robert," I reminded him. "You are welcome to visit any time you would like to spend time together. Patricia and Dorothy love meeting family members, and I would be happy to show you around the community." The silence on his end of the line told me everything I needed to know. The distance was not the real problem. The real problem was that I was no longer available to provide emotional support and validation on their terms and schedule. "Mom, we made a mistake," Robert finally admitted. "We should have talked to you directly instead of making plans behind your back. Margaret realizes now that her approach was wrong." "I appreciate the apology, Robert," I said sincerely. "But I need you to understand that this move was not a punishment or a reaction to being hurt. This was a positive choice that has improved my quality of life in ways I could not have imagined." I explained how my days were filled with meaningful activities, genuine friendships, and a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. I told him about the dogs I had helped train for adoption, the art class exhibition where my paintings had been displayed, and the book club discussions that challenged my thinking and introduced me to new ideas. "I learned something important about family relationships," I continued. "Love and respect cannot be demanded or assumed based on blood relations alone. They must be earned through consistent actions and genuine care for each other's well-being." The lesson I had learned was both painful and liberating. For years, I had accepted minimal effort from my children because I believed family obligation would eventually translate into genuine connection. I had made excuses for missed calls, canceled plans, and emotional unavailability because I thought unconditional love meant accepting whatever scraps of attention they were willing to offer. Moving to the coastal community had taught me the difference between loneliness and solitude, between family obligation and chosen relationships. My friendships with Patricia, Dorothy, and other residents were based on mutual enjoyment of each other's company, rather than duty or guilt. The result was deeper, more satisfying connections than I had experienced in years. "Robert, I want you to know that I hold no resentment about what happened," I said as our conversation drew to a close. "In many ways, that difficult evening was the push I needed to create a life that truly fits who I am at this stage." As I hung up the phone and returned to watching the ocean, I reflected on the unexpected gifts that had emerged from one of the worst nights of my life. Sometimes, the people who hurt us most deeply are actually pointing us toward the changes we need to make but lack the courage to pursue on our own. I learned that family is not always about blood relations, but about the people who choose to show up for you when it matters most. And sometimes, the most important person who needs to show up for you is yourself. What do you think about Eleanor's decision to start fresh at 65? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and your own happiness? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more inspiring stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is never too late to choose yourself. Thank you for watching, and remember that every ending can be a new beginning if you have the courage to write your own story.